So we've been off. The world is upside down. Horses are possibly doping in the Kentucky Derby. We find out that there is a fake athletic trainer on the New York Mets that Pete Alonso pretended to be. Brawls are breaking out over the difference between a rat and a raccoon at Citi Field. I've now had 2 back shots and I'm not a superhero. And oh yeah, Tim Tebow is a tight end and will be at least possibly playing in the NFL in 2021. By the way, none of these topics we're talking about tonight. We have other things to get to. My name is Steve Rabinowitz.
My name is Jay Kaplan.
And I'm Anthony Strait.
Welcome to On the Sports Lines, a special Monday edition as we near the NBA and NHL playoffs. Okay, with the pandemic pushing back the end of the 2019-2020 season in the NBA and NHL, we would normally be right now in the second round of both of these sports playoffs, but we're not even in the postseason just yet, which is good. I don't want to do too many lists this summer. I want action, and we're going to get action. Right now is the race for playoff position, and we're going to talk NHL along with the non-playoff stepbrothers of New York later tonight. But first, it's all NBA. All right. I'm not going to mansplain this to you, but I'm going to try my best to do this quickly. In 2020, down in this thing that we called the bubble in Orlando, the Portland Trail Blazers and Memphis Grizzlies, due to finishing so close in the standings, were given the opportunity to have a play-in series for the 8th seed. Portland won once. The game was entertaining. Portland was the 8th. That idea, because Adam Silver is a thinking forward individual, unlike baseball commissioner Rob Manfred, but that's for another time and another day, we now have a play-in week. 7's going to play 8 in both conferences. The winner is the 7 seed. 9 plays 10. Winner of that plays the loser of the 7-8 game. Winner of that game is the number 8 seed. Everyone else, bye-bye. Stars like Luka Doncic called the idea something he didn't see the point of. That was when he was the 7 seed. He's now the 5, and I don't think he's mentioned anything since. And LeBron, not one to mince words, especially in 2021, said the person who came up with this idea should be fired. Anthony, let's start. Are you firing any NBA officials over the play-in game, and what do you think of all the reaction to it from the NBA players?
My advice to Mark Cuban, Luka Doncic, and LeBron James is simple. Your team's voted for this format. If you don't like it, how about not lose so many games so when you're in the playing scenario? I think that's pretty obvious. Look, I look at it like this. Because of the condensed, shortened season, the fact they got to squeeze so many games in the time, it's a great idea. I look at it like that. It's a great idea. Allow teams a chance to normally would be out of it and just kind of playing out the string to actually play for something late in the season. I mean, LeBron and Luka Doncic may not like it, but say that to the Golden State Warriors, or the San Antonio Spurs, or the Washington Wizards, or even the Chicago Bulls, who got Zach LaVine back, and it still has a pulse to get to that 10 spot and give themselves an opportunity to sneak the backdoor when it's the postseason. Look, I do see there is one flip side to this, and it's kind of an advantage, kind of a disadvantage. If you are a 7 seed with a three-game lead over the 8 seed, and then you find yourself having to play one game just to very much get back into this very 7th spot you just had for like 2 or 3 weeks. So I do see a disadvantage to that, but other than that, I think it's a great idea. I think it's fun. I can't see it lasting beyond this season because the NBA plans to go back to the full 8-game schedule. And when you look at when the season is scheduled this year, which will be in July, and trying to get the seasons up and running again by late October, like I said, the only people that would not like it is the players. Of course, with fans, with members of the media, we love it because that gives us something to talk about as a segment. You just get off everything that went on with the NFL draft, stuff that's going on in baseball. You got the hockey playoffs coming up. So this is a great idea. And you got to think about this. It's a money thing too. The NBA, even with a small percentage of fans are losing money, that's a lot of revenue as far as not coming through the turnstiles. Second year in a row, the NBA is going to lose some kind of revenue. So this is a great idea to get, the extra money from the TV partners. I mean, look, ESPN and Turner's obviously love it, and they're literally keeping their fingers crossed for our Lakers Warriors playing a 7-8 matchup next week. It's still a lot of basketball left. I think it's like for this season. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of drama, and it really does. Look at teams like Indiana. You look at, like Indiana. You look at Memphis and even the Pelicans before Zion went down for the indefinitely. They had something to play for. They had an opportunity to make the playoffs, and games that probably wouldn't have mattered down the stretch. Like right now, I'm watching Washington and Atlanta. Those are two teams that are literally fighting for playoff position. In a normal year, this is a throwaway game. Like, you're not thinking about this, let alone it's on NBA TV. So I think it has opened up a whole new dynamic as far as how the season can go. I mean, there's always been talk of the league shortening the 82-game schedule. People complaining that it was too long. Maybe they should have a playing tournament or just go, best 1 to 16 teams. But I think it's a great compromise to start. Like, okay, look, we're going to give at least 4 teams that's at the bottom of the bracket an opportunity to literally earn their way into the postseason. And if you're in the Western Conference, if you're Phoenix and Utah, I don't know if the 7 of the 8 seed teams in this case are like pushovers, like it wouldn't be in normal years, because I don't know if you want the defending champs fully healthy or a red hot Steph Curry around one of a playoff series, and they could go.
Yeah.
And they look at the Eastern Conference. Boston, they lost Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony, we'll definitely talk about this stuff in a little bit when we get to our segments. But yeah, there's just so many teams out there who are fighting for all of these spots.
And one of the best things about the playoffs is that any team could get hot at the right time, and you can always hit upset.
Jay, I think your Sixers would be in that situation, getting one of those teams. But I think this has been a very good idea, and it's definitely a successful moneymaker right now for the NBA and getting a lot of buzz towards the end of the season.
I have to say, when I first heard about the NBA play-in format, I was not crazy about it. It seemed like a bastardization of the existing playoff format that had worked just fine for decades. 7th seed plays the 8th seed for the chance to face the number 2 seed in the first round, with the loser playing the winner of the teams that are 9th and 10th in the standings for a chance to play the number 1 seed in the first round. A little convoluted to me. So then I read an article in The Athletic by former NBA executive John Hollinger that had me looking at this play-in from a different perspective. Guys, think about the number of shows we've done over the years where we've bemoaned the amount of rampant tanking that would go on in the NBA as the regular season was winding down. Teams were looking to improve their ping pong ball percentage as opposed to their winning percentage. The play-in has changed that. Think about it. Teams like the Raptors, the Bulls, the Pelicans, and especially the Wizards, as Anthony mentioned, would have given up a long time ago in the previous format because the 8th seed would have pretty much been out of reach. This season with the play-in, they've been fighting to reach 10th place and a chance at the postseason. Don't know about you guys, but Russell Westbrook putting up insane triple-double numbers or more, games are more enjoyable when he's doing it in games that actually have meaning to the whole team as opposed to just his own resume. Play-in format also forces teams in the back half of the top 8 in the conference to keep their pedal on the gas instead of just using the final stretch of the regular season to rest players for the playoffs because their seeding was pretty much locked in. Think about a team I'll be talking about later in the show, the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers. In previous years, they would have recognized that they could push to get everyone healthy and maybe make a run at the 5th or 6th seed. They're 1 game behind Portland for number 6 and 2 behind Dallas for number 5 coming into the final week. But all they really had to do was make sure that at worst they stayed in the 7th spot to avoid a first-round matchup against the Jazz. This year, simply ensuring that they are no worse than 7th doesn't help them. The play-in format adds an additional element of risk. The Lakers could end up in 8th or miss the playoffs entirely. And there's also a reward factor. Finishes one of the top 6 teams, and you get a week off. The Knicks, for example, as well as they've been playing, they have the fifth best record in the NBA since April 1 at 14-6. There are only 2 bad games this last week from dropping to that 7th seed. The game against the Celtics, on the final day of the season, may have had some significance before Jaylen Brown got hurt, but this is the type of thing the NBA wants. The play-in format could give the NBA a first four type of feeling that the NCAA tournament gave us this March, a delicious appetizer that gets us stoked for the main course. Think about what another team from LA did in a basketball postseason coming out of a similar format. How much would the play-in games be must-see TV if a finally healthy Lakers team with LeBron, AD, and company had to possibly go through two teams to get even just to the eighth seed to defend their title? And I agree with you, Rabbi. If that matchup is Lakers versus Warriors, Steph versus LeBron, how do you not tune in for it? So sorry, LeBron. You may think that whoever came up with the play-in seed needs to get fired, but I've changed my tune, and I got to go agree with Hollinger. Whoever came up with it needs to get promoted.
I have to say, first of all, about Luka and LeBron's little, I'm not going to say anything until we're in that position. Shut up. Seriously. Shut up. You voted for it. You can deal with it. You can go in the offseason and say we don't want it anymore. But seriously, shut up. And even if the Lakers don't get that 7th seed, you still have a possibility of Blazers Warriors. You still have the possibility of Mavericks Warriors. And also for teams like the Lakers, they are probably going to win one of these two games. I know playing in a pretty much NCAA elimination type format is scary, but it can get you right. So, and again, I'll talk about that more later on. This is such a great idea. I don't like the elongated week that comes into it. I like the fact that I like to start the playoffs that Saturday from that Wednesday and kind of get into a format of, if you get the 7 or 8 seed, you're going to have to suffer and you're going to have to do a little more work because you needed to do better in the regular season. Jay brought the tanking up. It's eliminated some tanking. You still have those bottom feeder teams like Orlando and Cleveland and Houston who are tanking the hell out of the last few weeks of the season. You're not going to eliminate it completely, but not having 15 to 16 teams tanking and only having 5 to 6 is a lot different. We've had more meaningful games. This has probably been the most meaningful stretch at the end of a regular season that we've had at some time. I personally, this is never going to happen because to the NBA, more is better and we don't want to go less. I personally would like to see a 72 game season stretched out and this format year in and year out, even a 76 or 77 game season and this format year in, year out. There is a snowball's chance in hell that's going to happen, but this is probably the best case scenario for the fans. May not be the best case scenario for the players, but the players in the NBA are some of the most selfish ones that we have out there. They're always looking for themselves and usually getting what they get for themselves. So again, LeBron and Luka, shut up and let the fans have what they need to have.
Rabbi, can I tell you something? Researching this has been educational on a lot of fronts, but I learned a new acronym that I had never heard before, though I'm guessing, the younger generation knows it, to describe the reactions of players like Luka and LeBron. NIMBY. Which I learned in my backyard. So they don't give a, as you said, they don't care about it until it actually affects them.
Exactly. And that is, and it's just something that just annoys me to no end. But we'll talk more about the Lakers and Celtics, two possible play-in victims in just a little while. But let's go local and talk about one of the most successful teams in New York, the New York Knicks. I can't believe I just said that. Let's continue on. Those words
just actually tumble out of your mouth.
This has been the weirdest season of them all. This is the weirdest timeline. The shockingly 8 games over 500 New York Knicks are right now at 38-30. They will begin a final week that's going to finish their road schedule tomorrow against the Los Angeles Lakers, who are in a little bit of a pickle themselves. And I love pickles. And then 3 games in the final 4 days of the season, and what is essentially a dress rehearsal for playing teams. Spurs, Hornets, Celtics, we'll also get into later. The Knicks going in action tonight are number 4 in the East, half a game up on Atlanta, 1 game up on Miami, and 3 games up on the, are you there, God? It's me, Brad Stevens. Why didn't I not take the University of Indiana job, Boston Celtics? Starting with Anthony, what are you looking for in the final 4 games for the Knicks this week?
Right now, just throwing out there, Atlanta held on to 1-1, so that kind of puts a little pressure on the Knicks. I'm looking for momentum. I mean, you think about this: the Knicks have won 13 of the last 16 games. They won a 9-game winning streak that was snapped by Phoenix a couple weeks ago, with probably some of the most incredible shots you can see outside of a game of horse from Chris Paul late in that game. But you look at the numbers during that stretch, that 10, 11 games stretch, they averaged 118 points per 100 possessions at that time. And we always talked about how if the Knicks could get enough offense with their defense, what they could possibly do. Julius Randle, I mean, he's got to be a candidate for most improved player the way he's played. You know, he averaged 29 points during that stretch. Believe it or not, he's actually shooting better from threes than he is from twos this season. From 3-point shooting, he's shooting 46% compared to 45% shooting inside the arc. You think about the outside shooting of Reggie Bullock and 3-point shooting as well, how that's been key. He shoots 44%. But RJ Barrett is a guy I mentioned at the All-Star break, if he was able to kind of step his game up. He's done a good job of being a two scorer, being a guy who can get to the basket, be able to drive a little more. You see him being a little more aggressive over the course of the second half of the year. And I tell you what, and yesterday afternoon against the Clippers, a team that is literally number 1, or actually number 2 in 3-point shooting behind Utah, the Knicks really held their own. You know, he held the Clippers to 12 to 35 shooting from outside the arc. Kawhi scored 29 points, didn't shoot the ball particularly well. And obviously, that's the team I'm going to talk about later on in the show. But the bench as well. And obviously, I'll leave it to you to get into more specifics. But think about, you know, the guys like Gibson, Rose, getting Alec Burke back after COVID protocols, Obi Toppin, and Emmanuel Quickly, who's actually missed the last 3 games due to an injury. These guys have really picked it up, and you just see everything's kind of clicking for the Knicks. And you see the last 4 games with the Lakers, and obviously, like you mentioned, teams still playing for playoff position, San Antonio, Charlotte, and Boston, respectively. The Knicks, knowing that they have not 1 but 2 teams in Atlanta and Miami kind of nipping at their heels, and they're always 2 losses away from falling from 4 to 6, and possibly losing on home court advantage, but more importantly, getting an unfavorable first-round matchup. I mean, think about this. If you're the Knicks, you kind of like your chance against Atlanta or Miami, which would be kind of an old-school, low-scoring feel. All you need is Jeff McGunny to come out of retirement and bang on somebody's leg. But you go from that to, okay, now you open up against the 2-time reigning MVP and Giannis Antetokounmpo and a Milwaukee Bucks team that is literally, you know, make or break this season. I said before, they're in a championship bust area. So I want to see how the Knicks can really build on this stretch, especially the win yesterday afternoon in Los Angeles against the Clippers, and how can they finish strong against a Lakers team that's going to have LeBron back and have their backs to the wall, and these 3 other teams that are trying to pretty much fight for the playoff lives.
And just remember, Brooklyn is also a very distinct possibility if they fall back to that 6, because Brooklyn definitely is not guaranteed the 2 yet. A lot of ways that they can go this final week. Knicks have the tiebreaker over the Hawks. Knicks do not have the tiebreaker over the Heat. Got swept the Hawks this season. Did not get swept by the Heat.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that Knicks Nets round 1 of the playoffs, and in this city, in our area, how the atmosphere is going to be?
I don't think it would go well for the Knicks considering the 3 games they had against them this season, but we'll get to that bridge when we burn it, Jay.
You know, the what I will be watching is actually a who. And it's a guy I was really high on when he came over here, and that's Derrick Rose, who has steadily and increasingly been putting his imprint on this Knicks team since they acquired the former MVP at the beginning of February. Now, Elfrid Payton may be listed as the starting point guard, but he's more like a 1 or 2 inning opener than a 5 to 6 inning starting pitcher. Rose leads the bench units and closes out the games with the other starters. During the Knicks' recent 9-game April winning streak, he averaged 16.6 points and 4 assists per game on 53.5% shooting from the floor, averaging about a little over 27 minutes a game. And his numbers are only getting bigger and better in the 7-game stretch after the winning streak. Over that span, his minutes went up to over 29 a game. His field goal percentage went up to 57.3. His three-point shooting is a ridiculous 57.1%, and he's putting up 19 points and 5 assists a game. The Knicks are 22-9 in the 31 games he's played in his second tour of duty in MSG. I've been very impressed at how Rose has reinvented himself since his peak years in Chicago, and how the relationship between Rose and Tibbs has always brought out the best in his favorite point guard. Rose is smarter. He's a more compact player. He's replaced the unmatched athleticism we saw from him in his early years with new skills, and he's remade himself by embracing alternative training routines to keep him healthy. We know he was injury prone earlier in his career. His points have come in some very new and different ways. He's now a pull-up and off the catch threat, shooting 40% from three since joining the Knicks, including 45% on non-corner threes, which, according to the stat site Clean Glass, puts him in the 100th percentile among all guards. His proficiency with his new skill set has made up for the drop in scoring opportunities we're used to seeing from him at the rim and his struggles to finish consistently. He's offset that by taking teams to task with floaters and using creativity to get short-range jumpers off in and around the paint. He's become a mentor to rookie Emmanuel Quickley. He's made the best bench units a solid part of the Knicks' success. Putting Quickley and Rose together in the backcourt is the two-man combo with the fourth most minutes played and the second highest net rating per 100 possessions at plus 15.3. Quickley's three-point shooting is 10 points higher, 35-6 to 45-6 when he shares the backcourt with Rose than when Rose is not there. But it's not just Quickley who's played better with Rose alongside him. Obi Toppin's field goal percentage jumps by almost 6 points when he's playing alongside Rose, 46.5 to 52.4 as compared to without him. And there's a 36-point difference in the Knicks' net rating when Toppin is on the court with Rose as opposed to when he's not. Think about this, guys. The closing lineup that's gotten the most run, Rose, Bullock, Barrett, Randle, and Noel, plus 14.7 net rating per 100 possessions. For comparison, the nominal starting lineup with those four guys plus Elfrid Payton, minus 3.7 net rating per 100 possessions. Overall, the Knicks outscore opponents by almost 12 points per 100 possessions when Rose is on the floor as opposed to when he's not, according to Clean and Glass. And the Knicks play like a 69-win team with him on the floor. Now, it'll be interesting for me to see if Tibbs ramps up Rose's minutes this week so that Rose is fully used to playing 30-plus minutes a night, once the playoffs start. Rose's tops 30 minutes in a game 9 times as a Knick, averaging about 33.2 minutes per game when he does. And he puts up a stat line in those 33.2 minutes of 19.7 points per game, 4 rebounds, almost 6 assists, shooting 55% from the floor, almost 57 from 3, with an almost 64% true shooting percentage and a net rating of plus 18. I have a feeling that the Knicks will need that Derrick Rose if they're going to make any kind of playoff run.
Well, 31 minutes, 27 minutes, 27 minutes, 29 minutes, 32 minutes. The 5 games of this road trip, that's what he's logged. And that's one of the reasons why Rose has had 2 of his best games, tying his season high 25 twice in Memphis last week and the Clippers game just yesterday. I think the 5 on that closing lineup is kind of important, and it can be one of 2. Nerlens Noel, who got injured in that Houston game, has had some nominal lines since then. 5 points, 5 rebounds in Denver, 5 points, 5 rebounds in Phoenix, 5 points, 5 rebounds for the Clippers, although he did contribute 6 blocks in that Denver game. But a lot of that Denver game was garbage time. But Nerlens Noel averages 2 blocks a game. And since the Memphis game that really started the 9-game run, look at what you get out of Noel with blocks. 4 blocks, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 4. 0, 5, 0, and then the aforementioned 6. If you saw the Clipper game yesterday, even though the possession led to 2 points, Noel swatted the ball away from Kawhi Leonard at the rim. He almost does it once a game. It's just very incredible to see that Nerlens Noel, and Jay, you saw Nerlens in Philadelphia a lot, really get to this nominally good player who you can start at the 5 in crunch time. He's not the guy who you're going to run any offense through because he's still a very, very raw offensive talent, but he's really, really good at what he does. Also, you have Taj Gibson, who at times when Noel is at his worst, Gibson is at his best. He had 11-6 in Phoenix, and yesterday he went 8-5, but he also gets you blocks per game. He had 5 in the Memphis game last Monday. One thing that you can get out of that team is 5 to 6 blocks a game automatically. And when you can get that, it really shows how Thibodeau has changed the defensive mindset of this team. And it really, really shows how much they've been able to survive without Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder what you're going to do with Mitchell Robinson in the future. He's really only played 4 games since the beginning of since January 12th. Robinson is a young piece, and I'm wondering if you can, if you continue getting these numbers out of the 5 position. Hell, they've just done so much out of that position that I'm kind of curious of what the future is going to hold for Mitchell Robinson in New York, and if you could use him to get another piece out here scoring wise. But in this final week, what I really want to see is how, Jay, that closing lineup, especially at that center position, really establishes himself. There's one team that needs that week off more than anybody because of how many minutes they play. They only played really 7 players yesterday, more than 30 minutes. It's the New York Knicks.
Yeah, and Rabbi, you talk about what Nerlens Noel brings to a team, and you're right. I watched the guy, and you look at him, he looks like a string bean, but he is a legit NBA rim protector. He gets you points on putbacks, on lobs. He gets rebounds. You're right. You don't have to run any plays for him. It's the same with Taj Gibson. Gibson has proven he's more than just the Thibodeau whisperer. He's shown you that he still has some game left. But I will tell you this. I do think Mitchell Robinson still has a future in New York because he's on the upside of his career. And as much as, Taj has had a really good resurgence this year, I have a feeling that when, Robinson comes back, Taj's role is going to get reduced somewhat. I don't think he'll go away, but I don't see the Knicks parting with Mitchell Robinson because they look at him as a bit of a foundational piece, as a rebounder, as a shot blocker.
They do. I think, though, Jay, I understand what you're saying, but it really depends on what the next step for this Knicks team is. That's in the future. We can talk about that in the offseason, but I really do think the way this team is hummed without Robinson, who, if I had told you Robinson would be pretty much persona non grata for most of the season and the Knicks would be where they are now, you would be very surprised. And I think that really just shows how together and hardworking this Knicks team. They don't take
They are the epitome of their coach. They're a bunch of, they got guys who have talent, and there's no doubt about it. But even the guys with talent, they grind, and that is all Tibbs.
The difference from what we've seen in previous years in the Garden.
Yep.
All right, guys, dial up your Uber app and call an Uber to Atlantic Avenue. We're heading over to Barclays for the Brooklyn Nets. 20 games over 500 at 44-24. They are heading into tonight, half a game up over the second place Milwaukee Bucks. However, Nets still control their own destiny for that. The Bucks have a tiebreaker and a game in hand. They're 3 back of the Sixers, and Jay, I hate to say it, it's going to be a miracle for the Sixers to lose the 1 seed. We're not really thinking about that. Not jinxing them, but it's very likely. Very likely. Okay. The 2 seed gets a play-in victim in round 1 and not a fresh opponent with 6 to 7 days rest. Pretty favorable final week from Brooklyn. You're not going to see too many of these teams next week. 1 maybe. At Chicago, San Antonio at home, Chicago at home, and Cleveland at home to end the dress rehearsal for the 2021 playoffs, Nets fans. Anthony, give me something to look forward to the final week for the Brooklyn Nets.
Okay, first off, you never take an Uber from Madison Square Garden to the Barclays Center. You always hit the
Thank you. I'm like, where did that come from?
There's no traffic right now. I'm okay with taking the Uber. I don't want to take the subway if I don't have to.
I can't argue with him on that, and I can't.
That's true. I'm a penny pincher, so I try to save the most money possible.
Dude, you
look,
live
right there,
Barclays. You have no skin in this game.
You can
Step
walk.
off. You can walk. Step off.
For me, I think that the biggest storyline for the Nets has been the health question. I mean, the big thing have missed a games just alone. Jay Harden won't be really for the applause. He went down the last 11th season for the Nets. They don't really need him to play anyway. You think about this, the numbers. Durant, Harden, and Irving, the big three, have only played in 7 games. So 7 games, they're 5-2 in those games. With only 2 in the big three, they're 22-8. With only one of them in the lineup, they're 9-6. 186 total minutes. That's literally the big three that we saw come together in January after that trade from Houston. 186 minutes total for the whole season. If they look at this, 56%, they played just 56% of 64 games, the next 64 games total. But even outside of the big three lineup, you look at the injuries to the supporting cast. LaMarcus Aldridge had to retire because of a regular heartbeat. They just got Nicholas Claxton back from COVID protocols. They lost Spencer Dinwiddie early in the season, which kind of facilitated that James Harden trade. For the Nets, it's just I don't think they care where they finish as far as 2 and 3. As much as they just want to get through this last week of the regular season in some kind of in some kind of form with at least 90% healthy going into the playoffs. I mean, they got they have Blake Griffin, they have Jeff Green kind of all saying playing a center, and you got to wonder what's going to happen with the bigs in that regard, because DeAndre Jordan's been in and out of the rotation. In part due to guys coming back, in part to just being inactive. He's been helped to scratch quite a bit as of late. So with Steve Nash pretty much his responsibility is just, look, let's get through these final 4 games about the rest guys, because Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving played a ton of minutes. Kyrie Irving's actually playing is tied for the most minutes of his career, almost 36 minutes a game. And Kevin Durant, even though when he was supposed to be on a minutes restriction, ends up playing 25, 30 minutes, which is above the quarterly plan. Especially a couple weeks ago against Indiana, and that was a game that he was supposed to come off the bench to start the game and ended up starting. So Steve Nash has got a really kind of got a juggling act to do, because the Nets can still get that 2 seed, which is important in round 2 as far as getting home court advantage. But at the same time, because the Nets have struggled so badly with keeping guys healthy and keeping guys in the lineup, you want to get these guys healthy as quickly as possible, try to limit their minutes, maybe do go to a deeper bench these last few games, see what you have deep down the barrel, I call, like the 9th and 10th guys come off the bench to see what they can contribute if need be in the postseason. And the Nets need that week off. You talk about teams like the Lakers or the Mavericks, teams that has had guys banged up. The Nets, more than any team in the Eastern Conference, need that extra week off to get guys healthy, refreshed, and more time for Harden to get healthy again after he suffered a setback early last month, coming back from injury. So Steve Nash right now is just kind of playing this week conservatively, and to try to get through this last week and then get ready for whoever come out of the playing round and next week for the playoffs.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting playoffs. I like to see if Harden comes back, by the way. They're having rumors that this is you can't do it next week. Next week is the playoffs. Harden says he's supposed to be back in one of these final 4 games. And I think for Steve Nash, that's probably a good idea to try to get these 3 on the court, even if it's just for 20 to 30 minutes a game. Jay, let's not talk about the big three. Let's talk about someone completely different.
Like with the Knicks, the what I will be watching is a who, and that's Joe Harris, who has been struggling of late after being a consistent contributor to the Nets' prolific offense for most of this season, regardless who was setting him up from beyond the arc, where he makes his living as one of the NBA's best snipers. Harris has played a total of 125 minutes in 5-man lineups that also include Durant, Irving, and Harden. And those lineups have a plus 18.4 net rating per 100 possessions. So there's every reason to expect that Harris will get back to his pre-month of May level play once the big three are back for the playoffs, especially Harden, due to his ability to run an offense and set up his teammates. What I find really interesting, though, is the difference in Harris's pre- and post-All-Star break numbers and his win versus loss numbers. Pre-All-Star break, 14.8 points per game on 53% field goal shooting, a little under 51% beyond the arc, 70% true shooting percentage, and a plus 9.5 net rating. Since the All-Star break, his points has dropped to 13.2. His overall field goal percentage has dropped to 47.8. His three-point shooting has dropped, if you can call it that, to 44.1. His true shooting percentage has dropped to 62.6. His net rating has dropped to 5.7. Then you look at the difference in his performance in wins versus losses. In wins this year, 15.5 points per game, a little over 54% shooting from the floor, a little under 52% from beyond the arc, 71.5% true shooting. His net rating is plus 15.7. In losses, 11.4 points per game, little under 44% from the floor, under 40% from three, 56.8 true shooting, and a negative 6.6 net rating. Those are stark contrast. Harris is the number one role player and is counted on to take some of the offensive load off of Durant, Irving, and Harden, who will hopefully be back in time for the playoffs, if, as y'all said, not sooner. So the fact that Harris is shooting 39% from three and 38% from the field in these last 4 games, both of which are season lows, in which the Nets have gone 1-3, is a little concerning, especially since Harris is such a harbinger of good things for the Nets when he's on his game. Brooklyn is 12-1 in games where he scores 20 or more points, and he needs to get back to that level of play with the playoffs looming. As someone who does not create his own offense, Harris is very much at the mercy of the players around them and their ability or inability to get him the ball in his spots where he's most likely to make an impact on offense. So it's no surprise that of late, when Harris has a good game, the team is usually successful. And when he has an off night, so does the team, even if KD and Kyrie are putting up numbers. Maybe it's proof of just how much the team in general, and Harris specifically, need Harden back. But until the beard does return, Nash has to figure out how to get Harris back to his pre-All-Star break level, because if Harris's success is that reliant on Harden, then not only is he in trouble, but so are the Nets' chances of making a deep run in the playoffs.
Okay, yeah. So go ahead, Anthony.
As opposed from Joe Harris' last 4 games, is it just me or has the Nets offense really gotten stagnant and become a lot more isolated basketball than we've seen early in the season when Harden was involved? And we talked about Harden embracing that role of being a ball distributor to this team, and you see his absence being very noticeable the last 4 games.
Yep.
It was reported, by the way, that Harden might actually return on Wednesday. That was a Woj bomb, or that was actually done during our little pre-show talk. Nash has said all of his high-intensity workouts are done pretty well. It's all positive. And again, there's some pretty easy opponents that final week. Okay, so before we go on to our next segment, I have some numbers here. I'll try to include the numbers because this article was from last Saturday before the Nuggets win, which, by the way, important victory, winning in Denver on Saturday, because they were in their probably biggest funk this entire year. And if they lose any more than 3 games in a row, the national media all of a sudden hits the panic button. But here are some numbers. So with the big 3 in the lineup, I think Jay has mentioned this before because, of course, they haven't played since they're 5-2. With Durant and Irving, without Harden, 4-6. With Durant and Harden and without Irving, 2-0. They've only done this twice this season. With Harden and Irving without Durant, 16-3, and probably looking the best of a big two. And with just one of the big three in the lineup, with just Irving 3-4, with just Harden 4-2, with just Durant 2-0, which means they're 9-6 when anybody of those when it's just a big one. I'm very interested to see how the Nets treat this final week. I think they don't care if where they're playing that 2-3 game. The only team I think the Nets should worry about playing in a 7-game series is the Heat. I think especially with the way the Heat have played, with the way Jimmy Butler has played, he's a 22-7 guy since he returned. He is a guy who has postseason experience and the one thing that really excites me about these Eastern Conference playoffs is the Sixers really don't have any real postseason track record, and Doc Rivers has a choking record with the Clippers. The Bucks don't really have a track record, and the Nets, outside of Kevin Durant when he was with the Warriors, are full of playoff chokers. And this
Rabbi, you give Doc no credit for the title he won in Boston?
That was in 2008, Jay. We're talking about the Clippers. Let's talk about the Clippers failures that he's had. And I hate to say it, he's had a ton. And they haven't they've kind of overshadowed at least what he's done in Boston for a little while. So there's a lot of interesting components here in the Eastern Conference. But I think Anthony mentioned it best. It's all about health. And the Nets with the healthy big three give them the best chance to win. I know I'm not really reinventing the wheel when I say that, but this is going to be a very interesting Nets postseason, and we'll get to that in about a week when they start. There are other teams fighting for playoff positioning with very important games this week that are trying to stay out of the play-in that we're going to talk about. That's for me and Jay. The other one of us is just going to do another rant on the Clippers, and he starts us off. Anthony, what team are you looking for on your League Pass final week? We know you love the Clippers, so let's hear the rants.
Well, here's the thing about the Clippers is the Clippers are starting to get guys back. They got Kawhi back over a week and a half ago. They have Patrick Beverley back, and they've been trying to play with combinations of playing Beverley and Rajon Rondo, who they picked up around the trade deadline, trying to play them both in the backcourt at the same time, which is kind of interesting, seeing how Rondo is a very great ball distributor. We know that, but Patrick Beverley's not much of an offensive player. So you kind of wonder how that dynamic is going to play off. And then you look at the lineups. You know, they're trying to play DeMarcus Cousins to get him off the bench. Zubac has been a great player for the Nets. For the Clippers in that start lineup. And you got what's going to happen with Serge Ibaka when he eventually comes back. But the thing what strikes with the Clippers is that the players are saying that this year is different. One of the big things last year in the bubble was the chemistry of this team and whether or not they had enough time to piece it together. Think about this. When the NBA season was suspended was when the Clippers was really playing their best basketball during the regular season last year. And when it looked like they were starting to get it together, fast forward to the Orlando bubble, guys coming in and out. There was the Lemon Pepper Lou incident. Montrezl Harrell lost a relative. Zubac had COVID. There was so many things going on. And Patrick Beverley missed a number of the seeding games on top of that. So they were never really able to gel together. They kind of won that first round series against Dallas based on just having a tap in the day. We saw what happened after the against Denver. Stories coming out about the locker room issues and you wonder if this year they would be able to piece it all together. And you're hearing guys like Paul George and Kawhi kind of saying it's something different. But then an interesting quote, and I want to give me a second to look this up, that Tyronn Lue said, and this was in response to the fact that the Clippers in the last 5 games have averaged 16 turnovers a game, which kind of spells a team by itself for identity. He said, and I quote, "We've been messing around too much. We have to be more disciplined, solid team, which we did all season. But lately, we've been messing around, playing around with the game a little too much for me right now. It's kind of weird considering Doc Rivers kind of throwing the axe for this team after the 3-1 blown series lead against Denver. And Ty Lue was supposed to be the guy, the guy that was close to Kawhi, close to Paul George. They were able to piece it all together. And then you look at the Clippers playing the Knicks yesterday afternoon. Paul George had a nice first half, but disappeared in the second half. Which, by the way, he did the same thing against the Denver Nuggets a little over a week and a half ago on national television. And Kawhi Leonard, coming back from injury, had some pedestrian games. Had his best game back from injury, but he shot 9 of 29. So he didn't exactly shoot the ball well. And you saw the kind of same things we saw last season. The ball getting stagnant, not much rotation going on. And Rondo's supposed to have big help, but still a little bit about club locker room when Rondo, who's only been in the team for 6 weeks, is looked at as a locker room leader and not the two superstars who are making
that's
the money.
That's why they got him, Anthony. There's a reason why they got him. You talked to me and you said this is a good move for the team. That's why they have Rondo.
Yeah, it's a great move, especially on the court, because Rondo can he's the point guard they desperately needed. But at the same time, it says a lot about the locker room issues from last year and kind of most of this year. If a guy from a trade it becomes kind of the voice in the locker room, and not the two guys, not even a long-term Clipper and Patrick Beverley. So you got and now you look at it, they're on a dogfight for the 3 spot with Denver. I mean, and you look at the Clippers, they kind of want to avoid an unfavorable first-round matchup themselves. They don't match up well against Dallas when Kristaps Porzingis is healthy.
That's a huge qualifier, by the way, because he's never healthy. Move on.
Yeah, which is true. If you got Portland, you don't want to take your chances with a red-hot Damian Lillard, and we know we've seen him win a playoff series by himself in the past. And and Paul George have nightmares of that still, but you certainly don't want to roll the dice and get the Lakers round 1. Like you want to kind of get that 3 spot and kind of get more of a favorable matchup. But if you fall down to 4 or 5, who knows? And the Clippers this year, to me, feels more vulnerable than last year when we were all kind of bought in and we kind of looked up them as an NBA contender. So I want to see this last week if Ty Lue can actually do what Doc Rivers couldn't do last year and kind of get everyone on the same page. Because look at this, when the Clippers are on the same page, 2-3 shooting offense, one of the top 5 offense overall, they can get to the conference finals without question. But if we see some of the issues that kind of popped up, this week, as far as playing sloppy, maybe being a little lackadaisical on the court at times, which it took a good comeback to beat Toronto last week, and this is a Toronto team that's kind of playing out the string. But like I said, I'm not trying to rant against the Clippers. I do want to.
I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to cut you off. Yeah, you are. I'm going to cut you off. You are, and it's kind of. I'm going to cut you off here for a second. You always. It's funny how you say how they look lackadaisical during the regular season. Guess what? If anybody says how the Clippers are doing during the regular season, you know what the answer is going to be? Let's see it in the postseason. Oh, look, Paul George is scoring 28. Let's see it in the postseason. They literally are in a no-win situation during the regular season. Even if they win against 40 against Toronto, let's see it in the postseason.
Here's what it comes down to, man. Here's what it comes down to, okay? If you are a legit title contender, you do not play with your food, okay? And the Clippers have had way too many games where on paper they should be blowing teams out of the gym, and they let teams stick around. And look, it, like you said, took a huge comeback to knock off the Raptors. They should have run the Knicks out of their own home floor, but they didn't, okay? You cannot play with your food during the regular season and then flip a switch. You know what I'm saying? Right. This is the thing, and I have to agree with the rabbi. I don't trust them, okay? What past is prologue. I do not trust them. I think they do a lot of yapping, a lot of talking. They say all the right things and they puff out their chest, but I'm sorry. You've had way too many games where you've played with your food.
Yeah,
that's kind of Ty Lue's whole quote in a nutshell. I mean, the players are saying one day and the coach is saying something else and saying, you know what? Maybe you're as good as you believe yourself to be, but you know what? The playoffs is where you have to prove yourself. And
the only problem with that seeding is they're probably going to end up against Dallas, the Lakers, or 1-2-3 Cancun, the Portland Trail Blazers. This is going to be a very, very interesting first round matchup for the Los Angeles Clippers. What about the other tenants in Los Angeles, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers are going to be the team that I'm watching. I mean, the defending champs have looked anything but a championship team since, both AD and LeBron hit the injured list for extended periods of time. Davis was initially expected to be out for just a few weeks, ended up being on the injured list for 9 weeks. To make things worse, just a game after Davis's injury, Dennis Schroeder, gets ruled out due to health and safety protocols, misses 4 games. Lakers go 0-4 in that stretch. And at the time of Davis's injury, the Lakers were 21-7 and number 2 in the West. When Davis returned from that 9-week absence, the Lakers were 35-23, just 12-16 without him. And not long after he returned, Schroeder once again is ruled out due to health and safety protocols, and this time he'll be out likely until the playoffs start. Davis had barely returned to action when an ankle injury and back spasm sidelined him again, though he has bounced back with a pair of 35-plus point games over the last 2, including 42 in their win over the Suns last night. The Lakers are hoping to have James back for the second and hopefully final time tomorrow night, Tuesday night, against the Knicks, who are coming off a solid 106-100 win over the, as you said, Rabbi, the other tenant of the Staples Center yesterday. Now, look, while the Lakers, the injuries to their top 3 players is the easy thing to point to. And Rabbi, I said it to you, the moment that LeBron joined AD on the injured list, that the Lakers would drop below the 4th seed in a very loaded West, and I was right. And it is the major reason they're looking to play in squarely in the eye, even after a very convincing win over Phoenix Sunday night, snapping a skid that saw them lose 5 out of their previous 6. But that said, the Lakers had the odds stacked against them attempting to defend their title after the shortest offseason in history for a defending champ, in the NBA. 71 days, and still having to contend with the same rigorous pandemic protocols, but without the bubble environment in which they seemed to thrive last year. They've also struggled to get a consistent rotation, starting the season with 11 players, expecting to get playing time, and then with the acquisition of Andre Drummond and Ben McLemore, that rose to 13 players, causing the likes of Markieff Morris, Wes Matthews, Marc Gasol, Montrezl Harris, and Talen Horton-Tucker to move in and out of the rotation and not be real happy about it when they didn't play. Frank Vogel and his staff will have a real juggling act on their hands if the team makes the playoffs and does so 100% healthy. They're going to have to try and figure out how to get all these guys to buy into the changes in their roles, the decreasing playing time, as well as the DNPs that will happen based on matchups. Couple this with trying to reintegrate James and Schroeder with Davis and getting them back to where they were before the 3 of them spent more time on the sidelines together than on the court together. And it's not the way the Lakers saw this last week of the regular season playing out. Look, on paper, the Knicks are the toughest opponent remaining on the schedule. Lakers finish up their home schedule with the Rockets before going on the road against Indiana and New Orleans to wrap up the regular season. They are 1 game behind Portland for that coveted 6th seed we talked about earlier in the show. And the Blazers have a much tougher end of the season. Yeah, they're home for Houston, but then they have Denver, and in between those, they have road games at Utah and at Phoenix. If the Lakers have both Davis and James back for the remaining 4 games, I like their chances to run the table, but Portland has the tiebreaker due to winning the season series 2-1. So the Lakers kind of need the Blazers to pretty much go 1-3 to ensure
they can.
To ensure their chances for that 6th seed and avoidance of the play-in scenario that LeBron hates so much. Lots going on in Lakerland this week, guys.
I do have to say, though, the Lakers, and Charles Barkley made this point, and I kind of agree with it, and I kind of alluded to it in the open, or in the first segment. The Lakers need games with each other.
Yeah.
And so with the fact that you have a possibility of a Memphis San Antonio 9-10, and that being the second game where LA can kind of get right, might not be the worst thing in the world for LA.
You're not the only one who
week.
thinks that, Rabbi.
It might not be the worst thing in the world. Okay. It will be the worst thing in the world if the Boston Celtics make themselves in the play-in game, and that is almost likely going to happen. But I'm still watching them this week, especially after the news of Jaylen Brown missing the rest of the season as he has left wrist surgery. That's going to pretty much sideline him until the beginning of next season, if the next season starts in October, which Adam Silver has said it's going to be. He aggravated it in the Oklahoma City game a couple of weeks ago, kind of got a little bit re-injured when he crashed into Jason Tatum at the end of the Portland game last Sunday. He thought he would be in the lineup, but Brad Stevens says I'll have more information tomorrow. And unfortunately, that information was not good. We mentioned where the Celtics lie. They are 3 back of the 4-seed Knicks without a tiebreaker yet. They'll play each other in the final game of the regular season to determine that tiebreaker, but that game might be meaningless. They're 2 games back of the Hawks, now 2.5, no tiebreaker. And they're 2 games back of the Heat, and if they lose tomorrow to them, no tiebreaker, and they might as well just be more worried about dropping to 8 because Charlotte's 2 games back of them for the 8th spot. This is a team that has actually, you think that they've been healthy the whole season, but they've never had their top 7 available at one time or another. Kemba Walker missed the first month of the season rehabbing his knee and has basically never played a back-to-back this season. They have 2 more back-to-backs this week. He's probably not going to play in those second games. Jaylen Brown missed 10 games before this, and now he'll miss the final 4. Jason Tatum missed 5 games due to COVID and dealt with the after effects even longer. Tatum even admitted that. Marcus Smart missed 18 games with a left calf tear. Robert Williams, the Time Lord that everybody has been so excited about this year in Boston, missed 15 games due to COVID, hip soreness, and he may not play any more of the regular season due to turf toe. Evan Fournier, who they just brought.
Basketball player get turf toe.
I have no idea, but this has been the season from hell for the Celtics. Evan Fournier, right when he joined the Celtics, 10 games missed due to health and safety protocols. Tristan Thompson, 16 games, health and safety protocols. David Pritchard, 6 games, MCL strain. The Boston Celtics have made the Eastern Conference Finals 3 out of the last 4 years. Even last season, in the year when they were the 3 seed of the East, beat the Raptors in the 7-game series in the bubble, made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, lost in 6 to the Heat. They only were trailing by 20 3 times during that season. This year, they trailed by 20 13 times and had been down by double digits over 35 times. And they are basically right now a 500 team. We have mentioned the overachieving of Brad Stevens as the Boston Celtics coach this year. It's come back to bite him in the ass this year. The Boston Celtics, who were considered a title contender to begin the season, are nowhere near that now. They could still very much likely make it to the postseason. They would most likely play Charlotte in a 7 versus 8 game. Even if they lose that, though, they match up favorably with Charlotte. They raised the possibility of seeing Washington, a team who they did not do well in the regular season before their streak. And the fact that you could have Russell Westbrook in a 1-game must-win playoff eliminate the Celtics, I think Boston Celtics fans are going to cower in the corner because of that. The Celtics have been a very big disappointment this season, and the train wreck of the final week of the season is chugging along. They play Miami tomorrow night, too. Must-win game where they're going to be packing their bags for the play-in.
Well, at least Boston have the Red Sox. I mean, they got something to look forward to this spring.
And the Bruins. The Bruins who just won tonight and locked themselves into a playoff matchup with Washington. Speaking of hockey, let's move on to the Islanders, who just about an hour ago ended their 2021 regular season campaign with 71 points, a overtime loss to Boston, which guaranteed them a 4th place finish. and a first-round matchup with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Ooh.
The Isles will hope to regain the magic of the Toronto bubble, which got them 2 wins away from their first Stanley Cup in 36 years, and the Magic bringing it back to the beginning of 2021. And the last games ever at Nassau Coliseum. My God, tier. Star Watch, Stat Watch, and a look at the City of Champions, Pittsburgh, Jay, are all in this segment. Anthony, start with the stars.
My starter watch is gonna be Matthew Barzell. He played well in nationals, and was not in the off season. He's played well, and this is considering Anders Lee was lost for the season. There's been kind of a rotation of left and right wingers on the top line, which he anchors, which has been somewhat inconsistent throughout the season. But through all that, he has 43 points to 50 going into after 54 games. Obviously, they played tonight while we're on the air. But look at his stats: 16 goals, 27 assists, plus minus of 15, which is pretty impressive for center. One of the knocks on him was that his defense is kind of lacking behind his offense. This year, he's been more committed to the defensive end. He's done a better job of that. And look at it like this: the Islanders are going to have a tough matchup, and we all now know it's going to be the Penguins in round one. They're going to be scoring, and Barzell is kind of the guy that anchors that offense. And if he goes, so does the Islanders' offense. And look, they've had great goaltending all season, but if you're going up against the Penguins, you're going to have to score some goals. And Barzell is going to be very much key, not just scoring in his own right, but setting up guys like Pullard. Anybody that can get, set up his teammates, try to get shots on goal. And the Islanders they played very well in the Toronto bubble, better than anybody expected last season when they got to the conference finals. But they're going to have a really uphill climb when you realize the East Division was so stacked, and you added the Boston Bruins on top of it. It's going to be a real dogfight for the Islanders to kind of get out of that bracket in the first 2 rounds.
And Jay, you're known for the stats, so bring me some.
The stat of the night for the Islanders, and for this last stretch, 7-10. That's the Islanders' record since the trade deadline deal that brought them forwards Travis Zajac and Kyle Palmieri. The trade was made to fill the hole and add depth to the front lines created by the injury to captain Anders Lee. Zajac, veteran forward, adds quality depth, but Palmieri was the pivotal acquisition. The thought was that he'd replace Lee at right wing on the number 1 line with Barzal and Jordan Eberle and allow Barry Trotz to put his forwards in roles that made more sense. Palmieri averaged 26 goals and 50 points a year in his 5 full seasons in New Jersey, including averaging 10 goals and 20 points on the Devils' number 1 power play unit. That last part was expected to give a boost to a team that was 22nd in the NHL, converting on the man advantage at only 18% clip. But the Isles are 7-10 since that trade. Palmieri has 2 goals, 1 on the power play and 2 assists, and the struggles he had on the other side of the George Washington Bridge this season seem to have followed him to Long Island. He only had 8 goals and 17 points in 34 games for the Devils, which works out to a 19-goal, 41-point pace over an 82-game season, which is well short of his previous 82-game pace for the last 5 years, which is almost 30 goals and a little over 56 points. He was playing almost 18 minutes a game for the Devils. He's around 14 minutes for the Isles. And his points per 60 at 5-on-5 of 1.28 with Jersey ranked 236th among forwards who played over 300 minutes prior to the trade. When you consider that Trotz's system is all about winning the 5-on-5 time, that's a bit of a concern heading into the playoffs after tonight's loss to Boston, meaning that they finish 4th and a first-round matchup with the Penguins. They'll need so Brock Nelson had 2, Jordan Eberle, Kyle Palmieri, and Matthew Barzell all scored for the Islanders in their win over the weekend. Ilya Sorokin stopped 23 shots. They snapped a 3-game losing streak over the weekend with a 5-1 win. Trotz said the version of Palmieri he saw in this went against the Devils was the version he'd been waiting to see since the trade. And here's the quote. I love the way he played today. What I saw today is the Kyle Palmieri that I've seen as an opposing coach. I love it when he plays a little bit of an edge. He was skating. He battled, and I thought he had a lot of detail to his game. He played quick. I thought he got rewarded by going hard to the net. That's one of the reasons we got him. When he plays that game, which is more of a playoff style type of game, he can have an effect on the result, and I thought he was really good today. That version did not show up in tonight's game against Boston. He was -1, barely did anything in his time on ice. If the version of the Islanders that we saw in that home finale win against Jersey, which, as y'all noted, is the final game they'll play at Nassau Coliseum after returning to Long Island, if that's the one that we see when the chase for Lord Stanley's chalice begins, and as the rabbi knows, I am contractually obligated to use that phrase to describe the NHL's postseason, then they're a threat to go deep into the playoffs. But if we see the team that scored 1 goal or less 7 times since that trade, not counting tonight, and allowed 4 goals or more 5 times, again, not counting tonight, then it doesn't matter who they'll play. They'll have 0 chance of making the type of postseason run that had us all excited last season.
So, as I mentioned, we just figured out that the Islanders will play the Pittsburgh Penguins in round 1. And you're saying, oh, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the team that lost to the Montreal Canadiens in the bubble last year, that was going to finally change regime? No, they've continued. They've actually been kind of a little bit of a surprise this year in the Eastern Division. It's a very stacked division. There's a lot of teams you would expect finishing first. Pittsburgh is not one of them. 6-2 this season against the New York Islanders, but the Islanders have had their number. They've won 4 out of the 5 meetings that they had in the postseason, including just 2 years ago. And as we've all known, the Pittsburgh Penguins, at least the last 4 or 5 years since they won their second of their back-to-back Stanley Cups in 2016, have looked pedestrian in the playoffs and have had some very quick flameouts.
Nice phrase.
Sidney Crosby has been obviously their star. 55 games, 62 points, and this could be the last really ride for a lot of people. Malkin is kind of a little shell of his former self. He's a -4 this year when he's on the ice. Jake Gunsel, you have Chris Letang. This is a team that scores and scores a lot. 3.45 goals per game. Second in the NHL. Only Anthony's favorite Western Conference team, the Vegas Golden Knights, were better at 3.47. They're about middle of the pack in allowing goals a game. They're at 2.77. That's 12th in the NHL. They were just a team that kind of dressed 35 players this year. And so they know their starting lineup. They know exactly who they are. They have Tristan Jarry at goal. He has not been anything special this year. He is going to be one of their huge what ifs this season. And you've seen the Penguins in many years before have Marc-Andre Fleury and Nat Murray in goals. So this is going to be a very different type of Penguins team. And again, you have a big 3 of Crosby, who's 33 years old. I say he's old, but he's younger than all of us. Evgeny Malkin, 34. I say he's old, but he's younger than all of us. And Chris Letang, 34. Ditto. The Islanders have had a kind of rough, as we've documented, a rough finish to the 2021 season. Beginning of the season, it looked like they were possibly the best team in the Eastern Conference. Now, because of the Anders Lee injury, they're going to look a little more vulnerable. They might be the underdog in this series against the Penguins, but as we've all known for years, because of the Penguins' lack of postseason success and the Islanders' tremendous postseason success over the last 2 years, the underdog is kind of where the Islanders want to be in this series. All right.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all know that the Stanley Cup playoffs, it doesn't matter if you're the 1 seed or the 8 seed, and we've seen that anything can, will, and often does happen. So did the Islanders have a puncher's chance against the Pens? Absolutely. But
any of those 4 teams in the East, including Washington and Boston in the Zdeno Chara series, can win that easily and come out of that into that final 4 for the Stanley's Chalice, for Lord Stanley's Chalice.
You know, as much as we may enjoy the NBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs are a whole different animal. And, you know, there's something about them that always has us going.
It's weird seeing it in May and June, though. We're going to be seeing May, June, and July postseason basketball and hockey. It's kind of strange. All right. Finally, the Rangers.
Here we
go. A 60-point campaign was a small letdown, but this 2021 was supposed to be rebuilding in a condensed season. So NBD, get ready for 2021-22, right? Here comes the week from hell that started last week. First, Capital star / goon Tom Wilson knocked out the Rangers' breadman Alexei Panarin for the rest of the season. The league basically slapped Wilson on the fist with a small fine, and then the league gave the Rangers a much bigger fine for publicly calling out the league's disciplinarian to be fired. And then James Dolan, and here's a reference that only Jay will get, James Dolan, the man you see on your TV, not answering questions every damn day. The face on the Bad JD in the Straight Shot album, that man is him. Yes, Jesus knows him, and he thinks he's right all the damn time. Dolan decided to relieve team GM Jeff Gorton and president and all-around Ranger legend John Davidson of his duties. Meanwhile, us Ranger fans are questioning our sanity of why we even think Dolan will leave well enough alone. Guys, talk me off the ledge. Anthony, thoughts on this very long week for the Blue Shirts?
It is typical James Dolan. I don't know what else I'll say for the best to me that there's enough bad things you say about James Dolan because he fits the last one of them. Look, we look at the New York Rangers coming into the season. They're the youngest team in the National Hockey League by times even I watched them play and I was to myself, do they have enough guys old enough to drink on this team? That's how young they are. But you look at the division they were in, I don't think I think in another year they'd probably be a playoff team. But in this particular shortened season, where every game was in division, look at even at the 4 teams we talk about, the Islanders, the Capitals, the Penguins, the Bruins, they had to play them 8 times this season compared to the usual 4 games that you would see in a normal year. That's a lot of games against some tough you only had the Devils and the Sabres to really feast off of as far as easy wins. So you look at the 3-year rebuild. Jeff Gorton was doing a good job of just getting younger pieces together. You ask any NHL expert, any writer, anyone in the National Hockey League, and the Rangers' high ceiling was pretty high for a young team. They had the superstar, Artemi Panarin. They had the young players. They had the great secondary player, Mika Zibanejad. Everything was kind of falling into place. And James Dolan's reputation of being hands-off with the Rangers was kind of a stark contrast to his very too much hand-on approach with the Knicks and kind of screwing up. Think about this. Dolan's the same guy who fired Glenn Grunwald 8 years ago when the Knicks were coming off a 54-win regular season and a division title, the first in 2 decades, and a playoff series win in its 2000 time. And he screws that up. James is a guy who just feels because he owns these teams, he kind of has to put his stamp on the team. But the shock, and we talked about the topsy-turvy sports world during our pre-show banter. The Knicks are actually good, and he screws up the Rangers. During days, you will literally think to yourself, do James Dolan even remember he owns a hockey team at Madison Square Garden? Because the Rangers, for so many years, were left to kind of go about their business, do what they have to do, and you see as a result, they had a good stretch in the 2000s when the early 2010s when they were a contender. They made it to the Stanley Cup final. They made it to the Eastern Conference final. Won the President's Cup trophy at one point. 2017 had a pretty good Stanley Cup final and Montreal in the first round. That's all. The Rangers, they just did the right thing by pressing the set button. That no one signed off for him, by the way, 3 years ago, but apparently his notable impatience kicked in when he realized, the basketball team is good. Why can't the hockey team be good? Even though I'm quite sure he didn't remember anything about the Rangers leading up to last Wednesday when he decided to pull the rug under Jeff Gorton and John Davidson. By the way, he wanted to keep Chris Drury in the organization because there were rumors that the Florida Panthers was offering him their general manager job a couple of months ago. And also that press release is so James Dolan. I'm sorry. That was, like, when you hear press release and post attacks come out of Madison Garden, it's James Dolan written all over it, okay? Think about, this is a team that tweeted after Richard Jefferson claimed that he picked retirement over signing with the Knicks for free agency, and the Knicks sent out a press release on Twitter, of all things. This is the same James Dolan who attacked a fan and called him out for alcoholism. Ironically, since James Dolan has a noted history of alcoholism himself, which is ridiculous. The same guy that feuded with Knick legends, that kicked out Charles Oakley, that basically slandered Kristaps Porzingis on his way out, that James Dolan. But this was him with the Knicks. Now it's going to be interesting to see how he does with the Rangers. And remember, cancel the entire season. The Rangers have missed the playoffs 8 years in a row. Like, do we like Ranger fans probably are old enough to remember that? But if Dolan's gonna put his hand in the cookie jar with this team, like he's done with the Knicks for so many years, you know, don't be surprised if young good talent gets traded off for a rush job at a one-shot playoff run, or you see, you know, like, so often, it's gonna be like you're hoping that this is just Dolan being impulsive, but someone was just pulling. Who's Chris Sandler in all this? I thought he was an advisor. Like,
we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that in a second.
We're gonna get to that in a second.
Help me out.
Are you gonna mention that, Jay?
Just peripherally. All right, fellas. As I said in our pre-show meeting, I've got quite the rant. So buckle up, because here we go. This is proof. What transpired this past week is proof that James Dolan either truly does not know or truly understand, or both, what was really going to be involved in the rebuild plan that the Rangers committed to starting in 2018, even though Dolan was supposedly on board with the letter. And it also makes me wonder, like Rick Carpinello does, who's the Rangers beat writer for The Athletic, if Dolan doesn't really know John Davidson and Jeff Gorton as well as pretty much everyone else around the NHL does, even though he hired both of them. On February 8th, 2018, the Rangers sent out the letter. They explained to their fan base that in no uncertain terms it was time to start over. In point of fact, the Rangers started rebuilding the summer before, in June 2017, when they got rid of a pair of alternate captains by buying out Dan Girardi's contract and trading Derek Stepan. They knew deep down that when the next trade deadline came, they'd be sellers, and that everyone and every option would be on the table. They knew that the window that was open from 2012 to 2015, which, as Anthony said, saw them win a President's Trophy, played 12 playoff series, go to 2 conference finals, and 1 Stanley Cup final, had closed. The pursuit of another Stanley Cup had cost them first-round picks. They had none from 2012 until 2017, and they lost all of their depth at the prospect level. So in that letter, Gorton let the fans know that, quote, the decisions we make going forward will be based on long-term and not trying to save the season. Let's face it, we've had a pretty good run for a while, many years. We've had a team where we were looking to add at this time of year. Right now, as we sit last in our division, it's become increasingly clear that's not our team now. We need to do what we can to get as many assets as we can. We want players we can build around. And when Davidson came on board in May of 2019, replacing Glenn Sather as team president, he said he wanted to continue what Gorton had started, believing that the Rangers were doing it the right way. But here's the quote from Davidson on the day he was hired that shows that you cannot trust James Dolan to stay any course that doesn't give him instant gratification and immediate success. Here's the quote. When you get into a situation where you know what the goal is and you have a plan in place, and the Rangers certainly do have a plan in place, that's what you live for. And when you talk to Jim Dolan, it's what he wants. He wants us to stay with the plan. He has all the resources to try and help us do what we need to do to try to become a championship hockey club. Really? Really? I'm thinking not so much. As Anthony alluded to, anyone who knows anything about hockey knew that the Rangers were not a playoff team this season. They were the second youngest team in the NHL. The fact that they were in the hunt until the second to last week of the regular season is a testament to head coach David Quinn and the development and improvement the roster had taken this season. And yet, in a tweet typical of Dolan's ownership, the press release said that the changes in the front office were, quote, ownership felt that the Rangers underachieved that season. Ownership. As usual, Dolan himself would not come out and own that quote. Jeff Gorton's tenure as GM is highlighted by the Rangers farm system getting fully restocked, the acquisitions of players who will be the cornerstones of the team when it returns to contention. Mika Zibanejad, Artemi Panarin, Brendan Smith, Adam Fox. Yes, there were some acquisitions that didn't pan out, but no GM bats 1,000. Yes, the Rangers did not get the value they hoped for when they sent Ryan McDonough and JT Miller to Tampa Bay, and Tony DeAngelo and Jack Johnson were bad acquisitions. And yes, Kevin Shattenkirk's contract situation did not ultimately play out well. And add to that the buyout to Henrik Lundqvist and others, and Gorton stuck the Rangers with over $13 million in dead cap space for this season. But here's the thing, guys. A lot of that dead cap space is coming off the books after this season, so there'll be more room to improve the team. Before the season started, The Athletic projected the Rangers to finish sixth in the very brutal East with 59.9 points and a 34% chance to make the playoffs. They finished fifth with a 27-23-6 record and 60 points. And as I said, we're in the playoff hunt until basically the second to last week of the season. Pavel Buchnevich developed into a two-way forward and one of the team's best penalty killers. Capo Kakko bounced back from a rough rookie season. Fox developed into a Norris caliber defenseman. The defense went from being 9% worse than league average to 4% better. Plus, they got rid of Lindy Ruff, which allowed for adjustments to the penalty kill, turning that weakness into a strength. Rebuilding is a time-consuming process, and rushing it can set it back and undo all the progress that had been made. Most NHL executives know that a full-on rebuild takes more than 3 years, and making the playoffs this year should not have been the gauge for improvement and progress. But that's typical Dolan, right, guys? How often did ownership issue similar press releases related to yet another turnover of the Knicks front office, even if progress had been made in yet another Knicks rebuild? This year, the owner's favorite son is now successful, so now he decides to shift his focus to the one he previously ignored for years with the expected overreactions. Hey, at least the new Rangers boss is one who grew up under the old Rangers boss and was a big part of the plan behind the letter. Here's hoping Chris Drury is given the time to finish what Jeff Gorton started. He might want to wish for the Knicks to get their asses soundly kicked in the NBA playoffs so that Dolan can go back to focusing on them and leave the Rangers alone like he did for so many years. Here is the Rangers.
Please, for the love of God, no. I'm perfectly fine with that. No, I
didn't say you would. I said
no, I know, no, but I'm saying, please, for the love of God, no. One thing that I've noticed in the press release, and I have it right here right on my computer. However, in order for the team to succeed in the manner of our fans deserve, there needs to be a change in leadership. I didn't see too many people getting really upset that the Rangers were a 60-point team, as predicted, by the way, by the Athletic.
The only one annoyed by this is Dolan.
But now, because you two fucking ranted about Dolan, I'm going to have to play the contrarian here in some cases. Hear me out. The timing of this to the Tom Wilson stuff that happened on Monday, where a lot of people criticized the Rangers for not being aggressive enough and not having any real fight. That's not the way Gordon wanted to build this team. They didn't want to build it on a team like that. Was probably a thing that Dolan got pissed off. And Glenn Sather is still I think an executive vice president of this team.
He's a consultant to the.
He's kind of a consultant to Dolan. So I
he's
think
the hockey version of Isaiah Thomas.
Great. That's a good thing to note. But I think that was a concern of Sather, and that might have been a reason for why he wanted to fire Gordon. Also, because I think James Dolan just decided to watch hockey about a week and a half ago, all he could see was those 2 Islander games where they got their asses handed to them, which pretty much spelt the end of their playoff run in their playoff possibilities in 2020 or 2020, 2021. I wonder to myself if that the only person who was really supposed to go is Gordon. And if that's the case, I hate it, but I wouldn't have been too upset about it. Chris Drury, as Anthony had said, was going to get a general manager's job somewhere. Why? He's also helping out building the USA hockey team for 2022. Why not have the general manager's job here if you're not interested in what Gordon is selling you? That's perfectly fine. Gordon did a very good job with this rebuild. But again, to see John Davidson have to leave this team as unceremoniously is kind of pathetic. For the way this team has been improving over the years, and the fact that, again, they've went from having no farm system to a across the board from anybody, a top 5 farm system in the NHL. It's ridiculous to see that happen. And again, there have been so many good moves that the Rangers have made in the Gordon era, especially getting Fox for 2 draft picks. I think that Dolan is an idiot. Dolan is just somebody who doesn't really get sports. And I think, as I ranted to you guys last week, the only way that the New York Knicks and New York Rangers will be complete and whole is if James Dolan is in the grave. I did not want to say that, but unfortunately, James Dolan just doesn't know anything about. I don't wish anything bad on the man, but unfortunately, he is one of the privileged owners who thinks he knows something about everything. And you know what? He doesn't.
No, and part of the problem is, and you guys, he reminds me in a lot of ways of George Steinbrenner, from the perspective of he tends to make knee-jerk reactions based on whether he's won or lost the back page to the other team in New York. And that is not a way to operate a sports franchise. If you are reacting to getting, as you said, Rabbi, he probably didn't watch hockey until he saw the Islanders kick the Rangers' ass in back-to-back games. And then the whole debacle where it's, people are calling the Rangers a bunch of, weaklings because they didn't have any Bob Proberts or Stu Grimsons to fight Wilson. If that's the reason you're making, if you're making these moves and gutting your front office after it's done such a good job of bringing this team back to where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not an oncoming train, and you're making this based on knee-jerk reactions to emotional responses, you're an idiot. You're right, Rabbi. He's an idiot. He doesn't deserve to be the owner. And I'll tell you what, unfortunately, he's not giving up this team anytime soon.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'll tell you this, I hope the Knicks can sustain what they've got going, because the minute they even kick a pebble the wrong way, he's going to throw that front office out too, because he has no patience and understanding of what it takes to run a professional sports franchise.
I don't want to reason when Knicks had the draft going on, and James Dolan wasn't there because he was performing with his band, JD and the Straight Shot, the same night, which tells you everything about an owner, okay? When he picks his blues band over the team he actually owns at Madison Square Garden. Look, I said this plenty of time. I have friends that work at Madison Square Garden. It's not a great place to work. And believe it or not, I own shares there, and I'm a shareholder at MSG Network. I think to myself, do I really want to own this crap when I'm a fan of the owner, believe it or not? But then I look at it like this. It's that Dolan, he's impulsive. He can't help himself. And this is why when you're an owner, the smart thing to do is to bring in guys who can was smarter than you and they can run the organization and have respect the sport. And I think Dolan, it reminds me of Jerry Jones a little bit. He's a guy who wants the team's success, but he wants the credit behind the team's success, not necessarily the people he hired to make those things happen from the ground up. And you mentioned George Steinbrenner. A lot of you have a generation of Yankee fans who don't remember George Steinbrenner's impulsive actions in the 80s and the early 90s, as far as trying to get the Yankees to winning. I mean, you have a whole generation of Yankee fans who've never seen a team have a losing season. But, you know, the organization changed when baseball banished Steinbrenner for a couple of years. And that allowed the Yankees to build their farm system up and to put the team start over from scratch. I mean, think about this. You probably wouldn't have a core four with the Yankees if Steinbrenner was not kicked to the side for a couple of years. And with Dolan, you see that the Knicks are doing a good job. Leon Ross, Tom Thibodeau, Worldwide West, as he's known for in most media, they've done a great job. And they're doing it with the pieces they have. You think about this. James Dolan last year went a whole fire sale with a Knicks team that wasn't expected to be anywhere near a playoff team. He did the same thing with the I call it the ugly stepchild in his eyes, the Rangers. He couldn't ignore them for so many years.
His ego cannot allow a team that he owns to not be among the best in their sport. He can't handle it, especially if there is another team from the city in that sport that is doing better. Think about it. He can't handle the Islanders being better than the Rangers. He can't handle the Nets being better than the Knicks. His ego is driving his decisions, and all he is doing is screwing up both franchises.
Hey, look, Jeremy Lin and about a dozen Madison Square Garden fans have been kicked out of the building because they told him to sell the team, and he got a little offended by it. They agree with everything you just said, Jay.
And as we finish circling the drain from our first segment to the last segment, I think we should end our Dolan hate fest there. That does it for another edition of On the Sports Lines, the Fuck James Dolan edition, apparently. Facebook.com/On the Sports Lines if you want to see this show, LIVE. YouTube.com/On the Sports Lines if you want to see this show, ON space DEMAND. And Jay, I'll let you do the honors this week.
At ONTH Sports Lines is our Twitter handle, where you can follow us for links to this show and others, as well as the occasional interesting sports tidbit, just because we like to shake things up a little bit from time to time.
From time to time. Anyway, for Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, my name is Stephen Rabinowitz. This has been fun. We have a busy, packed sports schedule over the next few months. We hope you can join us. Pay attention to our Facebook page when we will tell you when we're on the air next live. And of course, always check out everything that we did, including our outstanding draft show, where me and Anthony both predicted a player going to the Jets and Giants later in the draft, except I predicted a player for the Giants that went to the Jets, and Anthony predicted a player who went for the Jets that went to the Giants. So that's an odd coincidence in itself, but check out everything at youtube.com/On the Sports Lines for that. We've had fun. We'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.